And even if the only thing that has changed is I've never paid attention to this before and now I'm paying attention to it, awesome. That is a start. And that is important because that is, like they say, the first step is admitting that you have a problem. The first step is noticing that you have a body. Like, oh, I have a body and that I can actually experience it. It's not just like this robot that's driving my brain around.
Hi, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. On the show, you get my conversations with peak-performing thought leaders, creatives, and entrepreneurs. Every week, I bring you the latest scoop on what these incredible people do to succeed and how you can get their secrets and do it too. Whether we're talking about best practices for spending time creating, how to work the business part of your business, or how to keep in that innovative mindset so you can keep living and performing, you'll get practical and wise information to use in your work and in your life. And now, let's get on with the show. Hello, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. My name is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I am super happy you're here. And I'm also thrilled to have this week's guest to introduce you to her. She's fabulous. Lissa Michalak is a registered somatic movement therapist and educator. I'm excited already. Certified as a personal trainer with the National Academy of Sports Medicine. She's also Pilates certified with the Kane School of Core Integration. And she's a dynamic embodiment practitioner with Dr. Martha Eddy. Lissa is, the best way to describe her is she's a movement hacker, and she can show you how to access your body's natural healing protocols using movement. I love that. Oh, my stars. I'm so excited. She's been a movement and fitness nerd since the early 90s and has injured pretty much everything at least once. Yikes. And she still trains Shaolin Kung Fu, turns cartwheels, and does all the fun things without pain. How amazing is that? Lissa, I'm thrilled. I'm excited about our conversation. Lissa lives and works in New York City, helping both entrepreneurs and employees to heal their bodies and accept the radical notion that it's possible to live a pain-free life. You might find her online referencing obscure graphic novels or offline hanging out in cadaver labs. Can't wait to find out what that's all about. Welcome, Lissa. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thanks, Isolde. I'm really excited to be here.
This is so funny. I mean, full disclosure, we're also friends in addition to you being a wonderful guest on the show. And we met through a mutual friend, Petra Mayer, who's also been on the show. She was on the show in the summer. And it's funny how friends can take such incredibly different paths in life. She's a books editor at NPR, and you are a movement hacker and somatic therapist. How did that happen? Because I love the notion that it's possible to live a pain-free life, but what does it mean, and how do you help people achieve it? So I know it's a lot of questions, and you can take them one at a time. We can start with, how did you get here? How did you get from, I went to school in Washington, D.C., and now I am a movement hacker?
It's one of those things where you can only connect the dots looking backwards, because looking backward, this makes total sense. So, in the bad old days of high school, back in the dawn of time before cell phones, so I did a lot of outdoor stuff. And in the winter, what we do is we had this like little mini National Outdoor Leadership School taught by a couple of National Outdoor Leadership School instructors who were super cool. And basically what we'd be working on is planning trips, but that wasn't particularly athletic, and this still had to fit a sports credit. So we'd also do some weightlifting and just like standard general body conditioning. And those of us who stuck around afterwards for extra body conditioning, extra weightlifting, we noticed how effective this was when we finally went out and we did the trip that we'd been planning all winter. We were the ones who were like, we'd get to the top of the hill, we'd look back and everyone at the bottom was going, oh my God. We're like, really, you guys? Oh, guess that worked, huh? So that was where I first started really learning about exercise physiology, because I am a big nerd and I tended to hang out with big nerds, including my teachers, who gave us all this information on sports medicine as it was current right then. Later on, I did a little meandering, went back and forth and thought, hey, maybe it'd be really cool to move to New York and become a writer. And I realized that just like just like my aborted acting career, I really didn't like getting all that freaking rejection. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe not. And then somebody suggested, hey, you're really into fitness, go into personal training. So right around the turn of the millennium, that's fun to say, I ended up going and becoming a personal trainer with the National Academy of Sports Medicine. So that's been, ye gods, almost 20 years now. Wow. Right. And it's like, I'm at that point of life where I'm like, oh my gosh, wow, I guess I have lived a long time, huh? I guess I do have a lot of experience. That's pretty cool. So, long story short, I got my personal training certification and I was so excited because like, wow, I'm really learning all this stuff and it's all updated from what I learned in high school and it's all awesome. And I immediately signed up for basically the techiest continuing ed thing that they had. It was a stretching certification that they actually don't offer anymore because it was too damn geeky. But essentially started out having to learn the origins and insertions of pretty much every damn muscle. That was fun. So then I started getting really into anatomy and I just kept getting geekier and geekier. I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. Like, oh, hey, what are the good instructors doing? Like, oh, hey, that's Pilates stuff is really interesting. And it's also really techy. So I actually used to have 3 different Pilates certifications. I've let all of them lapse except Cane School because that was my favorite and most comprehensive. But again, really, really big nerds. Like, how does the body work? How do we look at the form and the function and really make them fit? How does understanding the form improve the function? And again, just following like, wow, who is a truly amazing teacher and with a few words can change my entire experience of my body in this exercise. And then I ended up getting into somatics. So like I said, looking back, it all makes perfect sense, but I feel like I've been thrashing around for a lot of years before I finally figured it out.
It's interesting. It's almost like you've been following sort of a universal breadcrumbs to get to where you are. You said, and then you got into somatics, and I looked it up, and it's essentially the body sort of exclusive of the mind, which it kind of blew me away. I thought, okay, so it's the organism, it sounds like, rather than the sort of higher nerd functions, I guess. I would love it if you could explain so that you would explain it obviously much better than I can. What is somatics and how do you use it to help people achieve a pain-free life?
Well, that's actually a really interesting definition because most of the definitions that I've seen and the ones that I work with are that the body is not separate from the mind. The mind is the body is the mind. It's really, we are still stuck back in Cartesian thinking that like, oh, this is the body and that is the mind. And brief nerd aside, that all comes down to essentially in medieval times, all the doctors and physicians and anatomists were trying to work with the body and the church was like, excuse me, the human is our job. And they said, okay, the soul and the mind is different from the body. So we can work with this and you can work with that. And the church said, okay, fine, but be careful or we're going to have you burnt. And the anatomist said, and went off and did shots and named body parts, but that's a different story. Dude, like I can go off on drunken anatomists for a long time, but.
Oh yes, please. Let us discuss drunken anatomists.
So I also teach anatomy classes for movement teachers. So Pilates teachers, dance teachers, fitness pros, etc. And one of the it's so crazy when you're going into names of body parts because there's a whole bunch of different things coming into it. So I just keep imagining all these anatomists getting together like over a cadaver with shots of meat or whatever the hell, they've got around to drink. And they're like, what should we call this muscle? Well, oh gosh, I don't know. It's got a round cross section. So, being all Latinate, we'll call it the Terry's muscle. Yay, Terry's muscle, drink. Okay, fantastic. Now, what do we do with this? And they pick up like a pelvic half. They're like, wow, that's shaped like, I don't know what it's shaped like. We have no idea what this is shaped like. Let's call it the unnamed bone. Yay, the innominate, drink. I kid you not, it's called the innominate bone because it doesn't look like anything else. So,
wow.
Drunken anatomists. I just, It's a delightful mental picture and makes me very happy.
I love it. Drunken anatomists, they're sort of the foreparents, I guess, of people like you who now look at somatics and hack people's movement. What does that mean? What actually do you do to help people achieve that pain-free life? Like what is the process between what you do and how you help a client who is coming in and saying, "Oh, my this hurts, my that hurts." What do you do to help them?
Well, as you mentioned before, I've injured pretty much everything it's possible to injure. As a rock climber, kayaker, martial arts practitioner, professional Middle Eastern dancer for a few years, my body has gamely gone along with pretty much everything I've asked of it until something busts.
Mm.
And I apparently haven't learned from that because I kept doing it.
Mm.
So I've spent a lot of time in physical therapy and rehab, etc. And as I also mentioned, I've got this fascination with how the body works and, the underlying connection of the mind and the body, and how your experience in your own body, which is another big part of somatics, is really the baseline and the most important thing that there is really when you're talking about relating to your body. So, I'm sorry, I just like dropped right into my cells here and totally lost track of what was your question again?
Well, the curious thing that I'm thinking about is, what do you do to help people hack their movement? Like, to what end, and what do you do to help them?
All right, awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So the primary thing I do is I look at how people move. I look at their movement patterns. I look at their stance and their movement habits, because usually, like, unless they've had a really recent traumatic accident, and I'm talking physical trauma, like car accident, major fall, taking a header off a mountain bike, something like that, usually what's going on has come from movement patterns that are in the body and that have been ingrained for so long that the body's forgotten how to function efficiently and healthily. So, long story short, I'm going to look at, for instance, in a session with me, the first thing you do, and this is all over Zoom now, although I have, in the past, actually even before the grand pandemic hit, I'd been doing Zoom sessions too, because not everybody who wants to work with me actually lives in New York City. So
Right.
I had one day when I had a client in, one client in New York, one client in Utah, one client in Hawaii, and one client in Germany. I was like, wow, that was a day. But yeah, so what I would do is I would look at you, and I can do that over Zoom or in person. And right now, yeah, it's all over Zoom. And I'm going to see how you stand and how you move. Like, what are your movement habits? What do you do with that shoulder that hurts? Are you aware of it? How do we support healthier movement through that shoulder that hurts? And how do we strengthen the muscles that will help that shoulder get back into better movement habits? So, it depends specifically on what's going on with the human, because, there's a gazillion different things that could be going on with, say, lower back pain, with shoulder pain, with hip pain. I'm seeing a lot of shoulder and hip pain and lower back, especially lately with the pandemic, because people just aren't moving. And our bodies hate that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I know my body does. I actually do every 25 minutes I stand up and I do either 3 minutes of yoga or I dance. I just put on some song and I dance, because otherwise I hurt everywhere. So I totally understand
Right.
why. What was that?
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but it is interesting. So when you evaluate someone, you look at them, and it sounded to me like what you were talking about was like almost like you're a detective. You're looking at what are the clues in the way the body is moving, I guess, or the way that the client is holding themselves. Like what are you drawing on to figure out what your, I don't know if I can call it a diagnosis or a plan. I'm not sure what the right wording is, but what do you do to go from, I've looked at how you've moved and how you hold yourself. Now I'm going to figure out how to help you get to a pain-free state. What is the process in that in between place?
That actually, partly it comes from, innumerable years of looking at the body, figuring out how the body should move, how the body is put together. And that's where the anatomy labs come in, by the way, because that's freaking fascinating. But the more you know about how the body is put together, the more like how it's evolved to function, then the more you know how the body should be functioning. And a lot of times with most of us, like, hey, that's a platonic ideal. It's here is the ideal of how the body should function, and here is an actual human body. And we get it is process. There may never be like a resolution. Aha, I have now attained perfection. And when you do, please let me know, because I'm really curious about how that works.
Seriously.
But we can always get better. There's always, always, always a little bit better, a little bit clearer, a little bit more organized, a little bit more connected through the body. And I recognize that I'm being really, really vague here. But when we're talking about specifics, it really, like, I need to have an actual human body in front of me. For instance, let's see, let's talk about, let's talk about a hypothetical. For instance, if I see, say, a person who's coming to me with low back pain, I will take a look at their body. I'll take a look probably at how they're holding their head and their shoulders, but most importantly, how they're holding their hips. I have a lot of people with low back pain who are now sitting extra more than before. And there's a way that people's pelvises start to tilt forward. And so all the muscles in the front get super short, and all the muscles in the hips get super long and back, but then the low back gets really tight and crunchy, to use a very technical term. So a big thing that I'm doing is I'm trying to change that pelvic tilt. And sometimes it's just, hey, take your tailbone and drop it down to the floor. You do that and you're like, oh, well, I feel so much better. Thank you. Like, all right, problem solved. But now how do we get that to stay?
So that it becomes a more unconscious thing rather than someone consciously having to do that?
Exactly.
Okay. So how is it repetition? What do you do to make it more of a habit? Like, like you get up in the morning, you go to the bathroom, you brush your teeth. That's a habit. That's something we do without thinking. How does a client, if I were your client, how would I build that habit of tuck your tailbone under or drop it towards the floor or whatever it is that you tell me to do?
Well, one thing we do, if you were my client, then I would be looking at you and seeing how your body reacts to, point your sits bones to your heels, point your tailbone to the ground, lengthen your lower back. It all means the same thing, but one of these cues is going to make the most sense to your body. And we're going to say, aha, that's it. That's your silver bullet. Like, this is the one thing that's really going to help you out. And then, okay, so that's your cue, and your homework would be, okay, you're going to take that through the rest of the week. But then through the rest of the session, we'd also be saying, okay, now the other thing that happens is when your pelvis is tipped forward, then your ab muscles are held long, your hip flexors are tight, your low back is tight, your hamstrings are long. And usually your glutes are not functioning correctly. So we do some exercises to get you organized there. And depending on where you're at, what your life situation is, I'll either give you a buttload of homework exercises, or I'll give you, again, it's so freaking individual, but I'd be like, okay, here's where we're starting. We're going to give you like 5 to 10 exercises to do. Do these a few times a week. And so then you have something to carry you through the week. And go ahead.
Well, I'm just wondering, like, one of the things that I've noticed, I am a nerd when it comes to this sort of stuff. And if my chiropractor or whatever gives me, this is what you have to do twice a day, by gum, I'm going to do it twice a day because it feels better, right?
Yes.
What and that to me is enough. But Rich, bless his heart, my husband, all of you who, Lissa, you know him, of course, and all of you who are listening know him as well, because I talk about him a lot. He's one of those people who kind of goes, oh yeah, I did it 2 days. Yeah, I'm good. And then, kind of complains when it doesn't feel better long term. So have you come up with innovative ways to make that sort of thing stick? What do you do? Or is it more like you rely on the fact that, you're just going to feel better if you do it for 5 times a week, like I asked you to, it's going to feel better? Or is there some innovative way to get people to make these kinds of things a habit that I don't know about? Because I do it just because I'm a pain wuss and I don't want to be in pain.
Mm-hmm.
But other people probably need some other way of doing it. Have you come up with a cool way to get people to think about it?
Generally making it really, really bite-sized.
Okay.
You know, if I can say like, all right, the one thing you have to do all week is drop your tailbone to the ground. That's all you got to do. And I would honestly, probably during the session, I would lead them through an experience where they feel the difference between like, oh, wow, like, okay, I've started the session, my back really hurts, I'm kind of grouchy, and then I've done this thing and wow, I really do feel better. I'm like, right, hold on to that. A lot of the things about somatics, and this is the special sauce, so to speak, is that, again, your experience in your body is kind of the baseline, the paramount. So if I can give you an experience of being pain-free in that session, and I can show you how you have the power to give yourself that experience anytime you want, then that tends to help a lot of people. Like when they've experienced it in their body, it's like, oh, I can do this. I say, yes, you can do this. And especially if we link it to a particular activity, you know, for instance, if I have a couple of dance teachers and they say, oh, you know, when I teach this particular move, my back really hurts. So we'll go through that particular move. Like, okay, here's how your silver bullet fits into that move. And when you do that move with the silver bullet, how does it feel? Like, oh, hey, it feels a lot better. Right. Do that for a bit. Feel how much better it feels. And remember that you can do this every time. And in a way, this is kind of the gift of Zoom, because it's like, you know, I'm not doing this. I am on the other side of a freaking screen, sometimes on the other side of the freaking planet. So you're the one actually doing this. You know, you are the babe with the power, so to speak. And a lot of it sometimes is just helping people realize that, like, yeah, Dorothy, you had the power all along.
Okay. I love that. And it brings to mind a question that we started the conversation about this idea of somatics and mind and body being separate or being two parts of the same whole. What about people who aren't in their body? You know, what about people who don't have a real experience of being able to be in their body, you know, that it's almost that they're all in their head and they're almost divorced from their physical selves. How does what you do create an impact in people's lives when they're not really experienced with feeling their bodies and understanding what's happening and being able to assess, evaluate, and then make those changes?
I actually have a few clients who are just like that, and I love them very much. And actually, it really just comes down to patience and breaking it down into teeny, teeny, teeny little bites, because at some point, you are going to notice something. It's like in people who have zero interest in ever getting into their bodies, they're just not even going to call me in the first place, because they're like, that's not my jam. No, not cool. But people who are curious about their bodies, and like, yeah, like I don't really get this thing and how it works and whatever, but I'm really tired of hurting and maybe you can help. And like, it's the being tired of hurting that gives people the motivation to slow it down and to look inside and be like, oh, wow, no, I can actually feel that shoulder dropping. And that's a weird feeling and maybe a little bit creepy, but okay.
I love weird feeling and a little creepy. Yes, I have found that to be true too. When I was doing Middle Eastern dance, I was studying it, and I tried to do, I think they're called Mayas, the sort of side way. I got nauseated. It actually literally made me sick to my stomach. So I went, okay, obviously there's something there that I have to fix, but I have no idea how to fix it. So what happens when a client of yours has that sort of reaction where something doesn't feel right, or maybe even makes them nauseated, like happened to me? What are the processes for them to let you know, and how do you help them get through that?
Well, communication is so huge. I still have a couple of clients who have that old school belief that like it's supposed to hurt, and I'm still talking them down from that, because a lot of the things that I do actually work better when they don't hurt per se.
Mm-hmm.
So, a big part of that is just like, no, you actually have to tell me what's going on in your body. So, it's like, okay, this is making you feel nauseated. All right, cool. One of the things with somatics is that I work with not just the muscles and bones. I also work with the internal organs, and I work with the nervous system, and I work with all the fluid systems like lymphatic system and your blood flow, etc. So if, for instance, in that example, the first thing that flashes on me is, okay, these are your internal organs saying, what the bloody hell are you doing? We don't move like that.
Right.
So when your internal organs are panicking, yeah, sometimes that's going to read as nausea.
Right.
This is not okay. So for something like that, assuming that you would be my client and you would then say, wow, okay, I'm feeling really nauseated about that. Then what we do is we'd have some sort of, we'd sit down, we'd back it down and be like, okay, let's do some breathing and really getting into your internal organs. And this is where this is where we get fuzzy and weird. I will freely admit that I used to be allergic to the very word chakra. And now here I am talking about to talk about how actually my intuition is a really, really, really important part of this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say it's like, okay, what kind of exercises do these internal organs need? Like, all right, what they need is breath. So we would do something where you'd put your hands on your belly and maybe breathe into there,
Mm-hmm.
breathe back into the space behind your internal organs and in front of your spine. And if you do that for a second, you might notice a few things changing. You might notice, like you might notice your nervous system dropping down. You might notice your back releasing. You might just notice like maybe a little bit more ease in your stomach. We'd spend a little time doing that depending on how connected or disconnected you are. But by doing that, it kind of helps to bring some awareness into there so that you can move in that, in that hip figure 8 in a way that your stomach is like, oh, okay, oh, we've got this. We're good. We can handle this. It's not bad. It's just weird.
I love it. I love it. So it sounds like what you've been saying is so interesting to me because it feels like, especially with Zoom, that it's almost empowering the person to develop that awareness of what's going on inside them, and then to have a real say, be the person who actually makes the change that makes things work better. So it's an empowering system or process that it feels to me like you're talking about. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yes, it does. And actually, it's a very good way of describing it because, yeah, that is very much like it. And the other beautiful thing about this, about the empowerment, is that, like I said, I have had so many injuries. I had, being this incredibly active person, I then busted a disc in like 2012, 2013. And I was at a point where I could barely make it down a set of stairs. And that sucked.
Sure.
There's just no two ways about it. I'm like, my body's used to doing all these things and now it can't do anything. What the hell? So that was a whole thing. And one of the biggest things that's really helped me is this whole somatic perspective of I'm paying attention to my body. And a lot of times it really, again, it's the process, it's the awareness, it's me thinking about my body in a different way and experiencing it in a different way. So I have to stay very clear on what's happening in my belly, in my pelvic floor, in my lower back, in my chest, so that my core is well arranged. So then, yeah, I can go and do some freaking Shaolin Kung Fu, just like they do in the movies, Amitofo, because I've got that support. But I have to be able to perform the movement while also thinking about my body, which, let me tell you, is like rub tummy pat head to the nth degree.
Okay. So, I love, I love what you're saying. I'm a martial artist also, and this I study Aikido, which is all about sort of being aware not just of yourself but of the other person.
Hmm.
So it's building again, building that awareness of what's happening in your body, but also as how it connects to the person you're grappling with or sparring with or whatever. So when you're trying to be aware of your body and doing what you're doing, and then also grappling, the rub your belly, pat your head analogy works here very well. What do you do when you just can't? What do you do when you're, and how do you advise your clients when they're like, I can't pay attention to it and I'm backsliding? What do I do? How do I help myself now?
If it's in a specific movement,
Uh-huh.
then I'd ask them to demonstrate it. I'd look at their movement patterns and we just work right through it from there.
Hmm.
Just
Okay.
like, let's get super specific. But sometimes if it's a general, like, oh my gosh, I just cannot handle this. It's again, we just back it down. Like, okay, we're going to breathe. You're going to be aware of it. This is something I learned as a teacher trainer at the Kane School when I was a Pilates teacher trainer for a while. And kind of one of the things that we use all the time is baseline corrective baseline. So you get a baseline, like, okay, here you are. You can do a quick body scan. Like, how does your head feel? Your neck, your shoulders, your hips, your low back. How do your knees feel? Your ankles? Just like, you don't even have to change anything. Just check in. Like, okay, then we're going to do this breathing exercise. You're going to drop your sits bones. You're going to breathe behind your gut and in front of your spine. You're going to do that a few times. And then you can do that check again. Has anything changed? And even if the only thing that has changed is, I've never paid attention to this before, and now I'm paying attention to it. Awesome. That is a start. And that is important because that is, like they say, the first step is admitting that you have a problem. The first step is noticing that you have a body. Like,
Right.
oh, I have a body and that I can actually experience it. It's not just like this robot that's driving my brain around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this again, it seems to me we keep coming back to awareness. But what about when someone is an anomaly? Like they can't be aware or that their body is different. That, for example, I'm going to keep using myself as the example because I know my body best.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hyperextended in my knees very badly.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I walk, I probably walk differently than people who aren't hyperextended. Is there an intake form? Do you talk to people about it, or is it so much based on your evaluation of what they're actually doing that you figure out what's going on?
There's generally like an initial interview,
Hmm.
and I do have some movement screens that I run people through because they're pretty standard and very useful.
Hmm.
And I'm trying to get that down to as little as possible. It's like, okay, we've got the standard overhead squat test, et cetera, and a few other like push pull things. But it's mostly, what do you have problems with? How do you move in that particular thing?
Hmm.
And where do we go from there? I mean, I have literally worked with all kinds of people. I've worked with, people with ridiculous number of injuries who weren't me, people who have neurological disorders, people who have broken all kinds of things, people who are at the beginning of their careers, people who are at the end of their careers. And it really just comes down to, okay, when does it hurt? Does it hurt when you walk? Cool, let's take a look at your walking. Does it hurt when you sit? Cool, let's take a look at your sitting. Because it's usually something specific that the body is doing. It's some habit the body's picked up somewhere. And as you become more aware of that habit, then you can start breaking it. It's like, oh, okay, oh yeah, I keep like hiking up my right sits bone. And that's why my discs are getting grouchy, and that's why my entire right side hates me. And I'm using myself as an example right now. Like,
As you
oh
know
yeah,
your body best.
oh my gosh. So much physical therapy, so much indoor meditation. But yeah,
Okay. So, all right, I'm gonna just jump on in there. You said physical therapy. What's the difference between what you do and what a physical therapist does?
one, I don't have to answer to insurance. So that means that if you have back pain and you have hyperextended knees, that means I can work on what's going on with your knees and ankles and hips. And I don't have to only treat your back because that's all insurance will pay for.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I
Oh,
can take a whole body approach, and it's important, it's effective, and it's what actually gets the problem solved. in my
Okay.
experience.
Okay. So again, using myself as an example,
Mm,
you said that you believe in working as pain-free as possible.
yeah.
But I remember physical therapy when I had physical therapy for my knees, and it was very painful.
Hmm.
So how does what you do compare as far as physical therapy when it comes to pain? You know, I'm in pain, somebody
Pain.
else is in pain, doesn't matter. How does that work?
Well, one thing is that I don't use the same kind of physical manipulations that
Mm,
physical therapists do. Like even when I'm working in person, I'm not going to go in there and physically try to break up an adhesion. One, because I think you generally don't need to necessarily. I do tend to work on a longer time scale than your average physical therapist. It means like I've got more than 6 weeks to work with you.
mm-hmm.
So, I tend to like work at a minimum of like 2 to 3 months.
I see.
And so we've got time. I don't have to like, all right, we're going to go in there and bust things up. But the other thing is that when you're causing your body pain, then you're training your body essentially to shut off that area. Sometimes you'll tense up muscles, sometimes you'll actually deactivate muscles, and that's exactly what we're trying not to do in my work. It's let's get everything functioning together. It's actually one of the tools I use a lot is I use a lot of developmental movement where I've been using the phrase back it down a lot, but literally we're going to back it down into some of the movement patterns that every single human who can stand and walk has gone through as they've developed from being a baby who suddenly has to deal with gravity once they get born to a human who can stand up, walk around, and manipulate things with their hands.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes just going back there, that helps remind the body, like, oh yeah, I did this, I can do this, I'm okay. And that's kind of what I'm going for, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It sounds almost like it's a remembering of when you were pain free, of when you were
Yes,
moving pain free. I love it. So,
yes, very
uh,
much.
okay. Uh,
I was going to say not to say that if we do some exercises, your muscles won't be saying, "Ah, don't do that. This is too hard. I liked being lazy." But that's a different kind of pain.
right. There's a difference between you used your body pain and this is wrong pain for sure.
Right.
Okay. So again, coming back to myself as an example, I practice yoga every day and have been for almost 30 years now. What role do those kinds of disciplines, yoga, tai chi, anything like that, what role do or can they play in the work you do with your clients?
They usually serve as a structure or framework to hang the healing on. So it's like it's like if yoga is your framework, if that's where you're coming from, that's the work that you're doing, then we look, especially if you're wondering like, okay, I'm in downward dog and it's causing me pain in my sits bones. Like, okay, let's take a look at your downward dog. Let's see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, yeah, it's, I see this is going on with your hips and this is going on with your legs. And all right, that explains a lot. Let's change your awareness of your body in that posture and see if we can get more connected through the rest of your body instead of hanging everything off your sits bones, for instance. Um, or Tai Chi, same thing. I actually love the internal martial arts because a good internal martial artist is always looking to become more aware of themselves from the inside out and become more connected, through the bones, through the muscles, through the weight, through the chi, all these wonderful things. So, again, it's like, all right, let's take a look at your form and see how your movement patterns translate into your form. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. It's just you're giving me a lot to think about, so I'm taking a second instead of going, "Brr, here's the next question," because the what you just said struck something in me. You said that we take a look at your form, and by form in the case of Tai Chi could be the actual form that you're doing, the Tai Chi form, to
Mm-hmm.
see how you're moving in it and through it. And part of the Tai Chi form is visualizing an opponent, right? So you're not just doing the form, you're often visualizing someone there that you are doing this with, like Tai Chi push hands or something like that would actually be with an actual person. So the imagination plays a huge role in Tai Chi, and for me also in yoga and in Aikido when I'm practicing solo, when I'm practicing kata for lack of a better word. So What role does imagination play in the somatic process that you work with your clients in?
It's genius and I love it. Yeah, it's like imagination and visualization. Like these are some of the major tools in my toolbox because it's like, okay, we're going to get in touch with your thymus gland. Like we're going to what? Excuse me? Like, trust me on this one. You're going to put your hand on your chest and you're just going to let your brain sink back behind your sternum. And you're just going to feel something under there. And you're going to imagine that you can get in touch with your thymus gland, which actually turns out to be super important because not only does the thymus anchor your upper spine, but it's also quite literally where your immune system goes to learn what is you and what isn't you.
Really?
Really. It's this is another one of my favorite things to say is that in somatics, nothing is a metaphor. It's thymus gland. Thymus is what the T cells were named after. So all your T cells, they get created, they go into your thymus gland and they literally learn what is you and what isn't you. And this is so important for your immune system because if your immune cells have no idea what is you and what isn't you, they're either going to be like, whoa, hey, we're super chill. Just everybody come on in. Hey, you spiky looking weirdo, come on in, party with us. And you're going to get super sick all the time. Or they're going to be like, I don't trust anybody. Everybody must get out. And you're going to have autoimmune issues because you're going to be attacking yourself, which is a problem either way. So your immune system has to know what is you and belongs with you and what is not you and does not belong with you. And again, being in somatics, this is not a metaphor. The clearer you are on connecting to that physical anatomical part of your body, the better you can actually start thinking about, okay, what is mine? What is not mine? Is this stress I'm feeling actually something that I'm dealing with, or is that something that somebody else is dealing with and dumping on me? Is this my job? Is this my responsibility? Or is this somebody else's? So you start thinking about setting boundaries, and it becomes easier emotionally and mentally to start setting your boundaries when physically you are aware of the structures and the process in your own body that you are literally already doing that. So that's what I mean when I say the mind and the body are connected and when it's not a metaphor. And I hope to God that made sense.
It absolutely positively did. And it's fascinating because how do I put this so that it makes any sort of sense to anyone but me? I think that this idea of what is my burden to bear and what isn't my burden to bear is physical and emotional and psychological, and figuring all that out and really knowing what your container is so important. And
Yes.
sometimes I feel like when we're living in this very hyper connected world with social media and everybody's in each other's back pockets, those boundaries blur. So when you're talking with a client who's obviously carrying someone else's burdens, what do you do to help them realize that those burdens aren't theirs to bear? And it could be somatics, it could be often psychological, because I think psychologically our mind impacts our body. If we're worried, we stress, and the stress ends up becoming physicalized and all of that. So how do you help someone who is obviously carrying someone else's burden to release it?
Well, unfortunately, that starts to like brush up against the boundaries of my scope of practice. If somebody's like really got some major trauma, in which case I will refer them out. Say like, okay, this is something that you need to talk to a therapist about. And I actually have a couple of really good ones that I work with who actually do body-based work, which just makes us all very happy. But I would also be doing things like, okay, we're going to do work with the thymus gland. We're going to really feel how your body is already doing that. On some level, you know how to do this. We'd also do lymphatic work, because sometimes just being able to get in touch with that system, again, the lymph is very interconnected with your immune system. So anything that helps to boost your immune system is also going to help, anything that helps your lymphatic system get clearer in your body is also going to boost your immune system, which then feeds into that, like, oh, wait, I know what is me and I know what isn't me. And there really is something about having that experience in your body and like, oh, I know how to do this. And one of the things that I really try to do when we've got something that's that intense, sometimes it's just talking it out and letting the client figure out, like, oh, I'm just going to talk through this, and that's awesome, and I'm so here for that. And sometimes it's okay, and we're going to take this into the physical and give you that experience, and go journal it out or go talk to your therapist about it. Because again, some things like I am just not qualified to handle, and I don't want people to think I am, because then I get into trouble and they get into trouble and everything goes to hell.
And we don't want that.
No, hell bad. So, so basically what I would be doing is I would be addressing it through the physicality and just continually giving them that physical experience of, here is how you can feel safe. Here is how you can feel contained if that's what you need. Here is how you can feel expansive if that's what you need. Here is how you can literally feel the borders of yourself. And sometimes, actually, really most times, when you get, these things that I can say this right now, it's like, oh yeah, like 5-10 minutes, whatever, that's a thing. But if you can really go down into it, it's almost like a meditation that involves moving. And I know as a martial artist, you get that whole idea of a moving meditation.
For sure.
And so it's like we move and we think and we go inside. And there's really no way other to say than like, it's a moving meditation. You go internal, you have that physical, mental, emotional experience of, okay, now I really get it. And then when you come out, you have this experience kind of in your arsenal, so to speak. It's like, this is now part of me, and I can go back and I can access it. And, if I need to, heck, I'm going to be back next week and I'll, do it again with Lissa and all these things. Or, it's on Zoom meetings, I can just give you a recording of the session. You can literally go back anytime you want. And, but yeah, you can go back, you can have that experience, and then you can come back out and say like, okay, now I have a different perspective because I've had this different experience. In the past, I've had crappy experiences with boundaries. And now I realize that, I've had this good experience with boundaries. And we just keep physically rebuilding those good experiences until somebody really kind of makes that breakthrough. It's like, oh, okay, and now we move like this. And usually that also comes in with, and now my back doesn't hurt either. Because that's how the body operates. The body-mind operates as one word.
Okay. That was a lot.
That was a lot.
No, it's super cool.
Interviews are hard.
No. It's just, no, you're fabulous. I'm just in listening to what you're saying and figuring out, we've heard since the 80s, at least, that idea of mind-body connection and all of that. And you saying, no, mind-body is one word, takes it even a step further. So there's all this innovation over the last 30, 40 years, especially around this notion of combining them, and it's funny because the Merriam-Webster definition of somatics was that it was the body separate from the mind, and you're going, no, that's not it at all. And so
they're wrong.
Well, and that's the thing. And it makes me wonder what is the difference? If somatics is the mind and the body together, then what do we need to do to keep this is the Innovative Mindset podcast. So how do we change our mindset? What do we need to innovate to keep that at the forefront of how we, as people, as potential clients of Lissa Michalak, how do we do that? How do we keep working towards that space where we are thinking in mind, body, and changing perhaps practices or even our lives to do that? What are your thoughts on that?
I would say the biggest thing is just becoming aware of your body. It's one of the most, speaking of innovation, one of the most popular ways of working somatically that I've been seeing lately is something called somatic experiencing, which is actually a psychological practice. And it's, if you've ever been in a therapy session, your therapist has asked you, where do you feel that in your body? Then they're starting to think about somatics in their work. It's a small step, and it's very much on the other end of the spectrum from where I am, but it's a great step to begin with. Just like, oh, something's happening here. Where do I feel it in my body? Like, I notice I'm having an emotion. Where do I feel it in my body? Like, I'm feeling nervous. Where does it feel? Like, oh, it feels like it's, I don't know, on my left side of my upper chest, and it feels kind of clenched and heavy, and oh, that's kind of interesting. And as I'm paying attention to it, I feel like I want to take a breath there, and it's opening up and it's feeling less clenched. That's kind of interesting. Or maybe it's feeling more clenched. This is the thing with somatics, is that whatever experience you are having in your body is 100% true, 100% real, and 100% correct. It's whether you're noticing something in your body and it starts to feel worse or it starts to feel better, you're not doing it wrong. It's like breathing. Are you alive? Good, you're breathing right. There may be a more efficient way to breathe, but it doesn't really matter. It's like, if you can notice whatever is going on in your body at any moment, and really it's just like, hey, I remember I listened to that cool podcast and I wonder, what am I feeling in my body right now? What am I noticing? Like, oh, I'm noticing that, like, that right side of my lower back is grouchy again. Oh yeah, I'm lifting my sits bone again. Let me put that down. Oh, that feels so much better. Okay, that's really cool. Or, oh, I'm feeling a little tension in my back. I'm just gonna watch it. Okay, there it is. I'm feeling tension in my back. That's real. It's okay. I'm having that experience. Check the box. All right, that's cool. And maybe just noticing what's happening in your body is enough for today.
It's interesting that you said noticing about what's happening in your body. When I taught yoga, one of the things that I used to do at the end of every yoga session and at the beginning of every yoga session that I would teach was we would lie down before we did anything and we would do a body scan, and I would literally say, what are your toes doing? What are the balls of your feet doing? What are your ankles doing? Pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. Then run the class and then do a body scan afterwards. And of course, people always found a difference. There was something different, but again, I come back to those people who, and I had students like this, who did not have a real awareness of their bodies. So when I would say, pay attention to your knees, nothing would happen for them. So when we're asking someone to imagine, that they can actually go to their knees, or one of my favorite, as a singing teacher, I will say, breathe into your belly. And people are like, that's not where your lungs are, So I've had to go, well, okay, so you're not actually breathing into your belly because you're right. That's not where your lungs are. But then here's how the breathing apparatus works. And I've had to get pretty technical with them about the diaphragm and pushing all the other organs out of the way, blah, blah, blah. When you have to explain this thing to your clients of knowing or developing that awareness of their body, of where it is in space and the mind-body connection. So when you have to explain to someone who just doesn't get it, this idea of visualizing or where in the body to be, how do you do it?
Usually what I'll do is I will give them something physical that they can see. This is where my lovely assistant Napoleon Bonaparte's, my teaching skeleton, comes into play, because between him and a whole bunch of brightly colored masking tape, I can make a whole bunch of structures. And if I have to use internal organs, I have enough balloons and things around the house. I can work with that. But generally just be able to see where things are. And because he's three-dimensional, I can kind of rotate him around. And it really, really helps give people a sense of what the heck they're thinking about. Because everybody has these structures, and if they don't, they have an energetic space. This is the woman who's allergic to the word chakra. I just want to remind you. There's still an energetic space reserved in the human body for that spot. So we can work with that too. And Sometimes I'll bust out an anatomy book. I will bust out a website and just show people an image of what's going on. And this is what we're visualizing, because that really helps. If you have zero mental picture of what's going on, then you can't, if you have a zero physical picture of what's going on, you can't have a mental picture, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So that really helps. Like, oh, okay, I can connect with this kind of like, weird lung-shaped thing in my chest because, okay, like the little H-shaped thing. All right, sure, I can do that. Now I have an idea of where it is and what it's shaped like, so I can picture that thing in my body and start to work with it because I have some idea of what I'm thinking about.
And that makes all sorts of sense. And yet this brings to mind something that I've been thinking a lot about, and I started thinking about it even more when I started looking closely at what it is you do. You talk about the body's natural healing protocols, and I am of the mind, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I am of the mind that we are all naturally geared towards a state of wellness, if you will, that we're always trying to get to it in one way or another. We might not be taking the most efficient path, but that's what we're trying to do. And you talk about the body's natural healing protocols. I'd love it if you talk a little bit about what those are and how we access them.
It's long story short, you're right. The body wants to be healthy because evolutionarily speaking, the healthier your body is, the faster you get away from tigers, the longer you live, the more often you procreate. Yay, evolution. So, in a way, our body is always sort of remembering how it used to be, which is possibly, why it's so hard for us to accept exactly what we look like in the mirror now, as opposed to like 10 years ago. But, it's like our body always has this memory of like, okay, how to work correctly, because that's how we've evolved. Our body has evolved to work super efficiently. Our shoulder has evolved to work in a specific way. Our low back has evolved to work in a specific way. When we can use our bodies as efficiently as possible, it just plain feels better. And so our bodies, being pleasure-seeking creatures, are like, whoa, I want more of that. So eventually it does become a self-reinforcing loop. That's what I'm referring to as the natural healing protocols. It's like there's a way that the body works best, and the closer we can get to that, the better we feel. And that's what encourages us to keep doing it, because like, hey, it doesn't hurt. I like that. I want this more. Let's do that. It unfortunately kind of balances with the other evolutionary imperative, which is don't die right now. So we can get up to all kinds of janky movements in just continuing to keep on keeping on. For instance, if evolutionarily speaking, I need to run from a tiger, I'm not going to be thinking, oh, wait, let me get my hip and my knee in perfect alignment so that I cannot injure my knee and my ankle down the road, and I will run very efficiently. No, I'm going to go, gah, tiger, and I'm going to run as fast as I can. I don't care what my hip is doing. I don't care what my knee is doing. I don't care what my ankle is doing. I care what that tiger is doing and what I am doing. So the whole idea of balancing these two imperatives is, okay, there's the just bloody well move, do what you need to do and don't die, which is honestly where a lot of us are. But there's also the like, hey, I'm not being chased by a tiger right now. I can think about what my hip is doing. I can think about what my knee is doing. I can organize myself. And sometimes it's just getting permission on some level to be like, yeah, it's okay not to just do it. It's okay to really think about how you're doing it. In fact, it's really good for you to think about how you're doing it, because that's how you build those habits, so that next time you have to run from a tiger, hopefully figurative and not literal, then then you won't have to think about your hip and your knee, because they will know how to work correctly. They'll be like, aha, I know what this is like because I have practiced this. So yes.
Interesting. Okay, so this brings to mind another aspect of this, and that is ergonomics. Okay, so in that figurative, not running from a tiger, a lot of us spend a lot of time
Mm.
sitting in
Mhm.
front of the computer or whatever, or just doing motions repetitively without thinking about them.
Right.
And so that got me thinking about ergonomics and what role they play in healing from pain, and how you work with ergonomics to help your clients heal from pain.
Yeah, I've actually done a lot of ergonomics work, both online and in person. You know,
Hmm.
I've like given presentations to companies and all these things because ergonomics is so important, especially since most people don't do what you do and get up and move, which is so important for people's bodies. You know, the human body was never evolved to hold still. Give us a few generations and we probably will have evolved to sit in front of a computer, but we're not there yet. God help us. Right now, we're still, we're still very much evolved to move. So one of the things about good ergonomics is to not have to think about it, which is, philosophically mildly difficult for me because I want you to think about it. At the same time, I also understand that when you're talking with people on Zoom, when you're writing things that need to be written, when you're designing new classes, etc., you need to spend a buttload of time sitting at a computer. So especially when you get really into the zone, you're like, I can't get up because I'm finally on a roll and all these things are happening. So the point of ergonomics, as far as I'm concerned, is to support you as best you can in not having to think about your body, which I really hate having to say, but ideally you would also still be getting up to move,
Hmm.
because there's no substitute for that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because when you are holding your body still, your body eventually, no matter how perfectly you are set up, your body is still going to start hating you at some point, because that's not how we operate. However, we can certainly make sure that you're not causing yourself further damage by whatever your setup is. And boy, have I been doing a lot of that lately. Everybody
Help.
working at home, they're like, so I shouldn't be spending all day on the couch? Like, please don't, not with your hips.
Yes. Well, and that's the thing. There, some of this is remembering to move.
Mm,
What you said about you're in the zone, you don't want to move. But I've noticed for myself anyway that moving helps inspire me.
yeah.
I just like you can get in the zone and you're working really hard at the computer. Sometimes moving will help you think differently and be more innovative or creative in what you're doing, because there's a little bit more pep to your step. Does that make sense what I mean?
Yep. And we can talk about it spiritually, emotionally, or physically, because if nothing else, it's going to get some blood flowing. Because when you hold still for too long, your blood stops flowing as well as it might otherwise. So yeah, you're going to get those swollen ankles. It's going to start pooling down at the bottom of your body, because a big part of how the body operates is that as you walk and you move, your body kind of relies on those muscle contractions in the legs to help your blood get back up to your head. So it's actually a great kind of trigger. And one of the things I do with people all the time, it's like, use your pain as a Post-it. You should see my desk. It's covered in Post-it notes. But it's like, use your pain. When you feel the pain, that's when you check in with yourself. Oh, wait, what am I doing with my sits bone? What am I doing with my shoulder? Ah, damn it. Okay, let me rearrange. Okay, now it's gone. So sometimes your pain can actually be your friend, and just making that mindset shift can be huge. But it's, again, like you're sitting here and you're working, you're like, I'm so frustrated. Fine, get up, walk around, get the blood flowing, literally, change where you are, because you're literally locked into this one very forward and back physicality. Rotate a little bit, reach to the sides, whether or not your body accepts jumping jacks, reach your arms up to the ceiling and down, like, reach out to the sides, do something that isn't forward and back. Because when you change that physical movement pattern, you can change your thinking patterns. Again, it's that you have a physical experience of something different, and the physical then leads the mental. So that your body says, oh, this is different. And your mind says, oh yeah, it is. That's cool. Because just like the mind affects the body with stress, which is actually a fantastic example, then the body also leads the mind. When you're sleep deprived, when you're hangry, all these things, like your body is sending signals and it's affecting the way you think too. So use the power for good. Use that like, okay, I've been here for a really long time. I'm going to move my body so that I can feel different. And then I will, in the words of the poet, I will also think different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that reminds me of something that you do on Instagram called the Daily Dance Break.
Oh,
And I'd love it if you'd talk about what prompted you to start and what it's for and how it helps.
oh gosh, I love the Daily Dance Break. I actually haven't been doing it as much right now because I am working on a whole bunch of other projects. But the Daily Dance Break was basically a 6-month project that I did over the summer.
Uh-huh.
And, when we first went into quarantine, I'm like, oh my gosh, when we were really like quarantine, nobody was moving. Nobody was getting out anywhere. And so I was like, okay, I need to move and I need to move daily. And I need to do some, somatic work about getting into my body and then coming back out. So what I would do is I would get online 5 freaking days a week and do something somewhere in the vicinity of like 15 to 25 minutes of, a breathing exercise, a getting into your body exercise, and then put on some music and dance. And, either with specific cues of, hey, let's use these movements that we just did and really like kind of freestyle with that, with that experience that we just had, or just dance and have a good time and notice how your body is different than when it was, if nothing else, because you've just gotten off your butt and danced. It's actually kind of a great somatics 101 because it is, you will absolutely notice a change, if nothing else, because first you were just standing there and then you dance. And then afterwards you go back to a breathing exercise. And you're like, oh, yeah, this is different. If nothing else, my heart's beating and my lungs are breathing more than they were before. So it's just there. It has many layers. So first it's let's just get in touch with our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
We can do that. Do a breathing exercise. Let's do that. Let's move our bodies and get a little bit of exercise. You can do that too. And there's also, as I was doing it, I would go through different patterns. There's the going into yourself and then coming out, because that was something that a lot of us were dealing with a lot during quarantine, because we were going in and in and oh my God, I'm so internal, it hurts. And then it's like, okay, but to complete that movement, we then have to come out. And, early in June, a lot of us were like, oh my gosh, social justice, that's a thing. And I deeply apologize to everyone who's rolling their eyes and saying, yes, I know it's a thing. But then a lot of us had to go in again and get really internal about like, whoa, what does this mean about me and who am I, etc. But then we also had to come back out and take some action and do some things and start affecting the world in a different way. So again, it is symbolic, it is metaphorical, it is also physical, and having that movement of going in and then coming back out. When you have that physical experience, then the body affects the mind and you feel more ready, able, and willing to go out, to come from that internal and go back out into that external, like whatever that means. So whether it's now we're all ready to come back out after quarantine, please wear your masks. And
Seriously.
oh Lord, or whether we're ready to come out and start really affecting the world and making a change and putting our feelings about social justice into action, like any of these things, we're now a little bit better prepared because we have that physical experience. Or things like grounding. I was doing a lot of releasing fear exercises because it was scary. And honestly, it still is scary. And it's not going to get any less scary as we head into the fall and the winter and everything else, So
For sure.
Oof. So just there are a lot of specific things, and it's one of the things I'm working on right now with the Daily Dance Break that's going into the archive and trying to organize a little bit better. So if somebody wants to go in and like, I just need some breathing exercises to release my fear, you can find that. If it's, I just need, I need some high energy cardio work. Great, you can do that. You can find that too. Like I really want to I just want to think about my body for a change because I just haven't been. I've been sitting at a screen all day and, oh my God, here's this whole other part of me I've been ignoring. You can do that too. So that's what I'm working on right now, is just re-archiving the whole thing so it's a little bit easier to find exactly what you need. And I may end up doing some more live ones later on, but right now I am up to my ears in a whole bunch of other projects.
Can you talk about what some of those are?
Oh yeah, so this fall, this may have already been passed by the time we go live here, but this fall I am actually working on a somatic symposium with some friends. So we're actually specifically, it's a symposium on stress relief that we're going into. So we have all these different approaches on how to connect to your body, get that sensation of like, oh, okay, here's who I am, here's where I am on the inside, and how you can use that connection to your body to help yourself calm down and chill out, which is, something a lot of us could use right now.
Absolutely.
And also, I'm always working on my one-to-one sessions. I'm going to do a little bit more of that in the fall and just start talking to people more about how, hey, this is actually really good for you. It is something that can happen. And like, quite honestly, a lot of my people are, ready and willing and really want to make those changes, but they've been told over and over again, like, you're just old. It's just arthritis. You're just going to have to deal with it. And that is not at all the case. And it pisses the hell out of me when people are told that, because it's wrong. Mm-hmm. A lot of what I work with is that mysterious stuff. It's like, the physical therapy kind of helped and the doctor kind of helped and they want me to get surgery. I don't want to get surgery. It's like, well, let's talk, because if you need surgery, you need surgery. But if you don't need surgery, let's not do that.
Right.
Yes, I'm going to be talking more about my one-to-one sessions and about how I can do that later on this year. I also have, I have an online class right now for teaching anatomy to movement teachers, because in all honesty, not only does our educational system not teach us about this body that we live in, but frankly, the way most certifications teach anatomy is terrible and boring and perfunctory. And that pisses me off too, because damn it, anatomy is awesome. It's fascinating. And it's interesting. And frankly, if you're going to be working with the body, you need to know how the body works. It's like being a mechanic who doesn't know what a carburetor is, for the love of God. I barely know what a carburetor is, but I'm not a mechanic, so I have an excuse. However, if you have a body, you should have some basic knowledge. And if you work with the human body, if you are a personal trainer, if you are a fitness teacher, if you are a yoga or Pilates or dance teacher, you better know something about how the body works, because otherwise you are going to hurt people. And that's not okay. Like, that is completely out of integrity with being a teacher and having the responsibility to take care of other humans. So I might get a little passionate about this, but I've worked with a lot of dance students who are graduating high school and going into college, and they've already had career-ending injuries. I'm like, are you kidding me? It is so frustrating. And the numbers of Pilates and yoga teachers and fitness teachers even who I work with, and they're like, oh, wow, this has never made as much sense to me before. I'm like, I am so glad that you came to this class, because you're going to be happier, your clients are going to be happier, and there are going to be fewer injuries for all.
That's a good motto.
Oh
So where, if I, not that I am a movement professional or anything, but if I am a movement professional and I want to find this online class, how do I find it? Where, in fact, let me just ask, where can your legion of new fans find you?
You can always find me on Instagram at Somatic Anatomy, Facebook also, Somatic Anatomy. I'm occasionally on LinkedIn. If you find Lissa Michalak and Somatic Anatomy, you will find me, although I might not, at the moment, I'm not too active there. By the time this is out, that may have changed, but I'm not putting money on it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And you can always find out what's going on at somaticanatomy.com. That's where you can sign up for my mailing list, which is probably where you're going to get the most current, like, psst, hey, this is what's going on, because I tend to tell my people before I tell anybody else.
Ah, sneaky. I love it. Yeah. And it's, to me, being able to have those resources available, and
Mm.
also, the daily dance break, once you have that archived and all of that, is fabulous because people will be able to work with you, but also help themselves. And especially movement professionals. I agree with you. It's a good idea to know your anatomy if you're a movement pro. So, yeah, a body worker of any kind, massage,
Mm.
yoga, anything. If you're doing it, you need to know what the mechanics are there, or it could be potentially an issue. So let's see. So we've gotten the social media down. I feel like there's one other. I have a question that I ask everybody at the end of the show that I'm going to ask you, but I'd like to ask you one more sort of where do you envision our movement going as far as our bodies? You said, we might evolve into beings who are more well suited to sitting in front of computers. Do you believe that, or do you believe something else is going to happen? What are your thoughts on where we're going as moving beings?
Well, this is an awesome question. I'm really excited. I'm going to try not to talk about it for the next 5 hours, um, because I think that we kind of, given COVID and quarantine and everybody having to stay inside and have less contact with other people, I think we're at a bit of a crossroads right now. And we can choose to keep going internally and just fold into ourselves and sit in front of a computer. But I think a lot of people are actually realizing the value, both physical, mental, psychological, all of the things of actually being able to move, and the I don't know, the intangible benefit of tangible human contact. It's that we have evolved as social beings, as social creatures, and all this isolation is not good for us on any level. And I think that one of the things we're doing now is really coming to value our bodies and coming to value what they can do for us, and be super excited about the things that we can do with our bodies. And in a way, I'm really hoping that this turns into a big boost for somatics. In my dreams, in the next 10, 15 years, somatic stuff becomes as common as yoga is now. Like 20 years ago, yoga was still a little kind of like, whoa, it's a little weird, and like, okay, those freaky yoga people. But now it's normal. This is just, everybody does yoga. This is what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really hoping that we are ready now to drop a little bit deeper into our bodies and be like, oh, I can have this experience in my body, and that can inform how I move. That can inform how I interact with other people. That can inform how I interact with myself. And I can use my mind to change my body. I can use my body to change my mind, which is really just super cool. The idea of doing a dance break to clear your mind becomes not just like, oh, hey, this is a cool thing. But like, no, I'm going to like really totally recharge and reset and be on a whole new power level. And I think about movements like biohacking, and how popular meditation is getting. And I think it's not that crazy anymore, that, hey, just experiencing your body from the inside is going to become a much more normal thing than it ever has been.
I hope so, because to me, what you say makes so much sense. Just, I'm one of these people who grew up very much in my head and have sort of spent a lot of time getting uh, more into and aware of my body and what it's going through, and where it is in space. So I love the idea of it becoming more sort of part of daily life, how checking in with yourself and how are you and all of that. And I see people like you at the forefront of that, and I'm super grateful that that's the case. Ooh, I have to cough. Hold on. So that part of it is awesome. What about your business? Where do you envision, you're an entrepreneur in New York City,
Mm.
yet now you can be a worldwide entrepreneur because of Zoom and things like that. Where do you envision your business going? How are you going to grow it as an entrepreneur and as someone who is so innovative in the way you're approaching your business and the clients you serve?
Well, right now I'm very much focused on the one-to-one clientele and really just helping individual people get out of pain, because I feel like that's where I can make the most impact immediately on individuals.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping to end up doing more teaching for movement professionals, because that's how I can make a wider impact on the world. Like the more movement professionals I can teach how to really understand the body, then that's how, then they can go forth and they can tell their students and their clients how to improve their bodies. And it just, I will have a whole army of certified anatomically correct humans. And it would be awesome. I will admit that part of me just wants to certify people as anatomically correct, because that makes me laugh. But also because there really isn't a certification for an anatomical knowledge. And we all have to, like, as personal trainers, as fitness teachers, as yoga teachers, dance teachers, etc. Maybe not as dance teachers, depends on the kind of dance. But, we have to certify, we have to recertify, we have to keep up our knowledge, etc. And it's great. But usually what happens is people learn anatomy for they do their 12 hours anatomy requirement way back at the beginning, and then they just go off and they do their work. And one thing that I have found about anatomy is really you can never learn it well enough. The more you keep going back and learning about how the body works, how it's put together, you bring your experience back into that knowledge, and you bring that knowledge back out into your experience. So it's this awesome cycle that, the more you've done, the more the information has meaning for you, and the more meaning that you can put onto how the body is put together and how it works, the more you can understand about it. And then when you take it out and you apply it to your work, then you have this whole different experience of, wow, okay, now because I know this, then I can do that. And oh, now I'm seeing things I never saw before. And it brings a depth to your work, which is what distinguishes the master teachers, the master trainers from the beginners. And beginners might, they might be amazing teachers. They might have that spark and really be able to communicate. But once they've had that experience of going back and learning about the body and taking that into practice and back and forth, that's what's really, really, really going to deepen your practice, deepen your teaching, deepen your knowledge. And it's kind of beautiful to watch it develop in people, because I have some students who've been coming back for a while and learning things. And it's like, wow, you are getting really good at this. But just to see people who've done a lot of stuff coming into my class and be like, wow, I've never understood this in that way. And just seeing how and hearing how they're going to take that knowledge back out to their students and make their students' lives so much better. I mean, damn, I kind of live for that. What can I say?
That's fabulous. I love it. I love it. Okay. Well, I know that we could chat for the next 6 hours or the next 4 days, but I also recognize that you have a life to get back to and a business to run. So I want to, before I ask you my last question, I want to thank you so much for joining me to talk about this. It's an innovative field. Being the Innovative Mindset Podcast, first of all, I'm always looking for guests who are pushing boundaries. And even though you talked about setting boundaries, you're also pushing boundaries. It's a different way for many of us to think about our bodies and our body's connections to our health and our wellness in this way. So I want to thank you so much for being here and for sharing your wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for letting me ramble.
Oh, none of this is rambling. It's all fabulous. Are you kidding? That you've made a movement nerd out of me, or an anatomy nerd out of me.
Yes.
So there's one last question that I ask everybody who's on the show, and it's a silly question, but I find it often gives a striking answer. And the question is this: if you had an airplane that could skywrite anything for the whole world to see, what would you say?
I would say make friends with your body.
And there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of people think of their bodies as something to punish. And really, it's so much more fun to be friends with your body. So much more fun.
Yeah. And you know, this whole conversation started, we were talking about movement can be fun. And I think that's so much of this is that, oh yeah, life is ultimately kind of supposed to be fun. Whatever it is you're doing, it's kind of supposed to be fun. So being friends with your body makes all sorts of sense because hopefully you have fun with your friends. So there you go.
Darn right.
Lissa, thank you so much again for being on the show. If you have enjoyed this episode, you know how to find Lissa Michalak. And if you don't, you get yourself to somaticanatomy.com, find Lissa at Somatic Anatomy on Instagram, not so much on LinkedIn, but also on Facebook, so that you can follow her and see how she does making friends with your body good. And if you are enjoying the show, please rate and review it. I would love to hear from you. Feel free to comment and let me know what you're thinking about these incredible innovators that are talking about the way they're making a difference in people's lives and in the life of the entire planet. Until next time, this is Isolde Trachtenberg reminding you to laugh, learn, listen, and love a lot. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2020. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope. Until next time, this is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I send you all of my love.